Good evening, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. She actually touched on a few points that are crucial to my talk here. So I am here to talk to you about the future of specifically commercial drones. And the timing of my talk could actually not have been more perfect. This was not part of my plan thing, so I don't have a slide for this. But yesterday, the FAA released a 100-page document discussing the next 5 to 10 years of commercial drones in the United States. And that has a huge impact on what my company is doing and companies like ourselves. And so I'll try to touch in on a couple of points that were brought up in that document with regards to my talk here today. But a quick show of hands, who views the word drone as kind of a derogatory term? Like you feel like it's a government vehicle that's about to come spy on you or drop something on your head. Yeah, most people feel the word drone is used that way. So we've actually been advised by the government to not use that word. Now, that is the title of my talk today, so I will refer to them as drones. But as a company, we actually refer to them as remotely operated vehicles. And this gives people a little bit better feeling that somebody's in control, they're not being used for something negative. But I will refer to them as drones for today. It's kind of the word that everybody is familiar with. How many people here own a device like this, whether it be a smartphone or a tablet? Pretty much everybody in this room either owns one or is connected to one in some way. 7 years ago, that would not have been the case. 7 years ago, we had this revolution of these types of devices. And at first, only the cool kid in school would have one and everyone wanted to see it, but you never thought that you would actually have one. And now today, you can't live without it, and everyone has that. Now, let me ask you the same question. How many people own one of these, or this one specifically? Well, it's not in production yet, so I can guarantee you I'm the only one that has one of those. This is the vehicle that me and my company have built. And the interesting thing to look at is we are right now at the beginning of the drone revolution. The document yesterday kind of marks that date where commercial drones are coming. And companies like myself are working to develop vehicles that are being used pretty much every single day. Now, unfortunately, this is not the image you get when you see a drone. This is the image that you get when you hear the word. Now, this is a vehicle that was commissioned in the military by General Atomics in 2001. And every time you hear about a drone strike in the war against terror, this is something similar to what's being flown. Now, when we're saying that we're bringing commercial drones to the United States and to the skies above you every day, this is not what we're talking about. Now, granted, they are used for border patrol, not weaponized. We don't have weaponized drones over the U.S. today. But this is unfortunately what a lot of the lawmakers that are arguing about refer to. They don't look at the small handheld devices, but yet we all fall into the same category and we are not allowed to fly for good, bad, or any other purpose you can possibly think of. Here are some examples of the smaller types of drones. Now, some of these are military, some of them have been repurposed for non-military uses, but they're not all enormous. They're not all carrying missiles. They're not all spying on you. There are many applications out there that drones like the ones we're building, larger ones, smaller ones, can help out with. Whether it be a natural disaster like a flood, a hurricane, a tornado comes through, a forest fire, and you're going to look for survivors. Sometimes it's very challenging to get to those locations. Now, you might be able to get a real helicopter up with a few people on board. You got to run back and forth. You got to keep refueling. It's dangerous to be above a forest fire in a helicopter. You don't want to be on board that when you're flying through the smoke. And this year, actually, there was a lot of news about natural disasters, such as the fires out west, where amateurs were using their remotely controlled vehicles. We don't really call them drones because remotely controlled planes have been around for many years. They're just now getting scrutinized for flying over these types of disasters. And they're looking at those amateurs that are only trying to help the public find survivors and saying, that's illegal, you're not allowed to do that anymore. And they bring those vehicles to the ground and send those guys home, usually with a small fine. Now, other applications. With the growing population, agriculture is always an issue. There are people talking every day as how we're going to continue to feed the growing population. Well, one of the issues here is actually making sure that our crops are good. And this guy here in the field, he's actually doing an inspection of the crop. He's walking through the crops himself. So we can't possibly inspect all the crops that we are growing. The weather will change, and farmers want to know, how is that affecting their fields? Well, they don't usually get an immediate response. Drones could be used to fly over fields with special sensors and cameras and collect this data autonomously. So the farmer can just send out his device, it's part of his farm equipment now, and get a very accurate representation as to what he should expect his crop output to be. Now this here is the bridge in Minneapolis that collapsed in 2007. A lot of people heard about this disaster. I was actually up in Minneapolis a couple weeks ago, and they are still feeling the effects of this bridge collapsing. Now unfortunately, what many of you probably don't want to hear is there are 600,000 bridges in America, of which about 200,000 of them are in a state where if one component fails, the entire bridge is coming down. Now, we don't monitor that very well. Now, we do keep them on about an 18-month cycle of monitoring them. This had gone through inspection, and this was the failure point. Now, it's difficult to see here on the screen, but this is one of the gussets that was bowed about 30 degrees, and any visual inspection would have caught that. Now, we don't have enough personnel or enough time to inspect every single bridge every single month or every single week. But if you're using drones and unmanned systems that don't even need a person to go out there to monitor this, you can catch these types of failures much sooner and prevent these types of disasters. Now this is a relatively newer technology, especially in America. Now we've had wind turbines here since the 70s, but even more recently they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger and being installed everywhere. If you've crossed the country, across Nebraska or Wyoming or any of the big open fields, you will drive through immense fields of wind turbines. Now, does anybody see anything that's wrong with this turbine? Now, you're looking at it from the ground. Is there a failure on it, and how are you going to be able to tell? Well, that's this guy's job. Once again, the shape didn't work, but he's hanging up there off the tip of that blade. This is a picture I took. This is up north of Lansing here in Michigan. And every single day, he goes out and rappels down those blades looking for cracks. And when he finds a crack, they replace it, but if he doesn't, usually the wind turbine will have some sort of failure, which is really expensive to repair, and making wind power and other types of clean energy just not cost effective yet. Drones are another another tool that can be used to help keep these working and operational and cheap for the public. So you may not even realize it, but your electricity bill might be directly affected by the use of drones monitoring your infrastructure. The other thing that has been in the news recently is delivering anything to you with a drone. There's been tacos, there's been pizza, there's been a lot of funny type applications that may someday happen. But anything that you want delivered to you, whether it's through UPS or the mail or you name it, a drone may deliver it to you. Now it may not come directly to your house, but when we're shipping things around the world every single day in large cargo planes, someday that plane can be completely automated with nobody on board, making it much easier and safer to fly long durations and ship things faster without taxing the pilots that are on board. Also, filmography. Hollywood has been using aerial cameras for ages. Usually they're on a manned helicopter or a manned plane. A lot of those shots can be done with a drone. The cameras have gotten much better these days. And they're really small. A lot of people here have probably seen a GoPro or own a GoPro and put that on a device so you can get pretty high quality footage. Now that is enabling people who might not have the means to become a filmographer start working in this environment and getting those shots, whether it be in sports or for your own personal hobbies. Every one of you might have access to a drone to collect an aerial shot just for fun in the near future. And the infamous flying car. We've been hearing for decades that we will have flying cars next year or next year. I actually went to a conference 5 years ago where the point of the conference was to say within 2 years we will have flying cars. And I used to think that I was too young to ever see that we talked about it and it never happened. But I've now lived through going to a conference and hearing about a promise that we're going to have flying cars and it not coming to fruition. If we ever want this to actually happen, the only safe way to do it is if that flying car is entirely autonomous. So that you and your family can get in the car, tell it where it wants to go, it will jump into the skies onto the grid of flying cars and navigate its way to your final destination. Now the first test to be able to do that is to do that with unmanned vehicles. You do not want to be getting in the first autonomous flying car if it hasn't been tested without a man on board. So this technology it's at the very beginning of a revolution of autonomous flying systems that in the next 10 years will be dramatically different than what it is today. Now there's been research going on all over the world in these systems. This here is the Michigan Autonomous Aerial Vehicles team. It's a student competition team I started as part of my senior design class in 2009 at the University of Michigan. And we really just did it for something fun to do. And we found a competition, and in 3 years' time, we'd raised over $200,000 just to do a hobby at the university. It was not part of a class, it was not paid research. And we ended up taking this to an international competition 3 years in a row. And by the end of that, we were able to autonomously navigate an unknown building, mapping the entire building, reading signs on the wall, locating objects inside of that building. And all we ever did was hit go. So that's where this technology is right now, is being able to send a device up on a mission, and it can complete the entire mission without you having to interact with it. Now, a lot of people see that as scary. Doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to change its course of action or tell it to land. So there's still a lot of safety features built in. But this is the research that has since spawned the company SkySpecs that we've developed. Now we're focusing on commercial applications like I mentioned before, and specifically a lot of the structural applications that I talked about earlier. But like the large drones, like the small drones, we are not legally allowed to operate in the United States. Now this mentality has changed significantly ever since I started the student team. Our first year of competition was in Puerto Rico. We had to fly down to competition. And we weren't quite prepared. We were kind of throwing all of our things into a box and heading to the airport. And we're going through security, and I've got 13 guys all wearing matching shirts. We're clearly from the University of Michigan, clearly together. And TSA pulls me aside and starts opening my backpack and pulling all these parts for our UAVs out of my backpack. And he pulls the batteries out, he's pulling all this stuff, and he's like asking me what all this stuff is, and he'd never heard of any of it. Well, we had already gone through the process, gotten the paperwork, we're allowed to fly with our device, and they still took it from us. And I was able to pick it back up when we came back to Detroit, but we went to competition in Puerto Rico without our working device. And it was kind of depressing for us at the time. Fortunately, the next year's competition was held in North Dakota, so we were able to drive there. But the point, we don't fly with our batteries anymore. The point of this, though, is 2 weeks ago, I flew to Minneapolis with this device for another talk I gave. And on my way back to the Minneapolis airport, I had this in my bag, and it went through the scanner, and the TSA agent opens up, and he goes, "Oh, neat, a drone. Like, what, are you selling these? Can I get one? Do you have a card?" He was all excited about it. It's been in the news, and he didn't question me as to why I was flying with it at all. And I didn't have anything dangerous on board or any of that. It was simply just the structure. But he no longer questioned it, and I noticed that as a change in how the public is starting to perceive these devices. So this, an old telephone. Do any of us think that this is something we should be concerned about, new technology, like privacy-wise? Are you being spied on through your telephone every time you pick it up? Or cameras. The first time these devices came out, nobody knew what they were going to be used for. They were probably going to be used for bad. Or the computer. The first time that people started using computers, I remember when my parents and their generation started using computers, and you heard about a virus, and you're like, oh no, what's this virus going to do to me? And everybody was scared of computers. There was a quote that there's no reason for any individual to have a computer in his home. I hear very similar quotes about drones these days, that there's no reason for individuals to have drones. Now this quote comes from the president of the Digital Equipment Corporation in 1977. He's since stated that he didn't mean it that way, but everybody still took that and has run with it for many years to come, that he didn't think that we needed computers, and now I hear this every day that we don't need drones. This is a representation of the internet. Now, the first time the internet came out, was everybody concerned about privacy? Nobody wanted to get on the internet without knowing exactly what they were doing, what they were connecting to, but now you guys don't even think about it. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, the cell phone in your pocket. So all of you have the ability to go out into the world and use this technology, and you don't think twice about the privacy issues behind it. Yes, there are privacy issues. Yes, it may be used for bad, but for the most part, there's good intentions behind all of this technology, and most of us use it for good. Even social media. Everybody is so willing to post everything they're doing, even here at this event where everyone's tweeting about what they're doing right now. Anybody can find what you're doing and know what you're up to, yet we're concerned about privacy from drones. Now, unless you're doing something that requires somebody to come spying on you, your life probably isn't that interesting that the government's going to send a drone out to follow you every single day. But yet everyone is still concerned that the drones are here and the drones are going to spy on you. Right now, there are 2 certifications for a legal drone to fly, and that's actually up in the Arctic Circle in Alaska where they're doing testing. It's predicted that it'll be 250 certificates by 2015. Now I put this up here about a week ago. That number may change with the new paperwork that I said was released yesterday. I expect this number to get much larger by 2015. And by 2020, it's expected that 10,000 UAVs will be flying over top of your heads in America. Now 10,000 might seem like a big number today, but given the size of the United States, you still probably won't see them on your daily walk or on your way to work. But they will be out there operating for these commercial applications that I mentioned before. It's also predicted this is a $94 billion market in the next 10 years and will produce 70,000 high-tech jobs in America, both from the manufacturing, the operation, the development, and where a lot of this is being focused in is in small startup companies. The point of my talk is to show that each and every one of you can have an application for a drone. You may think that nobody's going to build this for me, but the drone revolution is being carried by startup companies. It's not being carried by the bigs, Boeings, and the Lockheed Martins, and granted, they are building them, they have a lot of them, but they're still focused on the military application. This commercial application is something that each and every one of us can participate in. With the do-it-yourself drones you can get off the internet, or the small companies that are selling to your needs, if you've got an idea, you can bring it to them and they can solve that problem for you. So at the beginning of the computer revolution, this is the picture of a computer. And now we all know what computers look like today. So imagine if this is the picture of the beginning of the drone revolution, what will they look like in 10 years, and what will you do with a drone? Thank you. Thank you.